Our own plans, our own attempts to make God's will happen create separation. That's a pretty strong warning on how and why we make the plans. In her heart, who do you think Sarai is doing the plan for? Everything's really going well for Abram. You know, he's making good decisions. He's learned that God is universal in his world, that he's greater than geographic locations. He's learned to trust God to protect him even when he makes a bad decision with the situation with Pharaoh and Sarai. And so now with Lot, he's like, no, you pick and God will take care of me. And he's really doing well. I mean, things are going well.
It's stunning. It's so hard for us to put ourselves in the context of the day and the culture of the day. He's not reading anything about God. He's not listening to a podcast. He's not going to a church. This is entirely experiential. It's entirely an encounter after an encounter after an encounter with the living God of the universe, who is totally reshaping the way that Abram thinks about everything.
Yeah, it makes me think that maybe a good exercise for us to do at some point is to just get away, not even with a Bible.
Yeah.
But just get away, just alone with God and say, God, start talking. I want to hear your voice. I want
open my ears to hear how you've already been talking.
Talk to me about whatever you want and practice for 24 hours or 48 hours just listening to God. That's more what Abram's doing, only he's doing it in the course of his life. And because of how story is told or understood, this is over time, right? He's not getting all this in a week. This is over years that we're watching him experience these things. And I think Moses, in his explanation of the origin stories of Israel, wants the Israelites to know this is not an overnight thing. This is a journey. It has a wilderness. It has wilderness times. It's a journey. It's a time of, there's revelation as we go along and learn from negative circumstances, from failure. Yeah, don't think it's this instantaneous, especially in our day, that it's this instantaneous, I'll hear the right podcast, boom, we're going to get it.
Yeah, I remember reading that even after the original call out of Ur of the Chaldeans, by the time that interaction with Lot and he ends up actually in the land of Canaan, I think it's 10 years.
Yeah.
And so we see these incidences, but there's years. And that just tells me that we need time to practice what we're experiencing and what we're learning, that we don't just get it overnight like that.
Right. And the reminder, which is what we're going to see next in Abram's life, that the lie never stops. The liar never shuts up. The temptation never just vanishes. It's always present. When we read the story of the temptation of Jesus, it says after Jesus has the victory by truth-telling against the lies of Satan, that Satan leaves him. But the passage ends with, and waits for a more opportune time. So it's not over. Even with Jesus, it's not over. I'll be back. And where we really see the enemy come back, probably directly to Jesus, is in the Garden of Gethsemane. But even in the life of Christ, for sure in the life of Abram, the liar's not done. The liar's not done, no matter how well things are going. And we need to stay disciplined.
And we're more spiritually fit. The lie is present, but the more we walk with God, the more we have experiential encounters, the more we're able to stand firm against the scheme of the enemy.
Right, and keep the liar out where we can see him.
Right.
Unfortunately for Abram, he gets blindsided.
Woo.
And
marital conflict?
Little marital issue. And the thing is, when the enemy comes in the way of the world. When the enemy comes, it's not like this bizarre, it's like, no, this is the way the world works. It's that idea. It's like, well, that kind of makes sense. And we're back into God's plan doesn't make a whole lot of sense in terms of the world, but here's an idea that does make sense. So we have Abram, and he has this promise that he's going to be a blessing to all the families of the earth through his family, through his descendants.
Through his offspring. And obviously that means Sarah's going to have children, right? Sarai is going to have children.
Right. And so I would love to hear the conversation between the two of them because they're getting along in years, right? And she knows what's happening in her body, probably more than he knows what's going on in his. And so can you imagine their conversation? He's like, no, I think this is going to happen, And maybe he's getting romantic with her. He's like, come on, I think this is going to happen. And she's probably less and less convinced that this is really going to work this way. And they start to, at least Sarai really starts to have an issue with it. And it's like the lie starts to press in.
Right. So assuming women's bodies worked the same way at that time period or were on the same time schedule, she's postmenopause. She's been barren her whole life. And I can imagine that has become somewhat of an identity for her, maybe not consciously, but in that culture, we read about it in several different biblical accounts of different women, barren. There's that word, and it carries such a stigma. I am barren. And what a burdensome identity to bear. Of course, we know it's not her real and true identity, and we're going to get to that later. But it's this identity that the world has put on her, the culture has put on her, and it carries a negative connotation.
Which is from the perspective, well, probably of the man and woman both, but of the woman, what's the negative connotation?
Well, somehow God's not with me. Somehow God's not with me, because if God was with me, if I was blessed, if I was favored, I would have lots of children.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting how when we use the I am statement, if I said something, like when you're speaking Indonesian, they rarely would use the word in their language never, right? They don't say never. That's like too strong of a permanent word. So instead they always say belum, not yet. No matter what you ask them, like, has the sun turned to ice yet? They would say, well, not yet. They would never say never. But the word barren has a finality to it.
Yeah.
And as you're saying, it doesn't mean I haven't had a child yet. If I ask someone, have you had kids yet? And they say, no, I'm barren. Like, it's a heavy duty word that is some kind of permanent,
yes,
deserty, bleak emptiness. Like it's all about nothing good is ever going to come from me.
Right.
Wouldn't you say? So to say I am barren, and isn't it possible, whether you're male or female, to look at yourself in the mirror of your life and say, I'm barren. I've never really done anything. That was something my dad used to always say, I've never done anything with my life. I've never become anything, all the way to his dying day. And in a sense, he would look at his life and say, I didn't produce anything living or of value, even though he's looking at us, but I guess that didn't matter.
I'm sorry.
I know. Maybe I need some healing there. But he would say, my life has been barren, right? So that word is heavy, and it can be applied male or female. But in Sarah's case, it's barren, and I think Sarai's case, and as she's saying it to Abram must be thinking like any really man who loves his wife. It's hurtful to him too, because he's realizing maybe this isn't going to work. Maybe this isn't going to happen.
I think Sarah begins, as we've said before, thinking to herself.
Right.
She becomes her own source. She's heard the promises. She knows the promises. This voice of God has made to Abram. And just like some of us feel, I think I'm going to help God out a little bit. Okay, so we're going to have children. How can we make this happen? It hasn't happened yet. And it's been several years, a lot of years. And again, it's common sense. I can't have children. And so how can I manipulate this situation so that this promise can come true in my lifetime? I want to see it happen.
Right.
I mean, I'm just imagining what she might be thinking and how she manipulates the situation. And she has this maid servant, Hagar, which is common for the time to have servants. And we know that Hagar was from Egypt. And so I wonder if even when they were in Egypt, I don't know, I'm just wondering, when they were in Egypt, if maybe that's when Hagar maybe she was a gift from the Pharaoh as they were leaving. And she has this maid servant, and so she gets this great idea. Yeah. I will send my maid servant in to sleep with Abram to help this promise along a little bit.
Right. So let's stay in that decline there. So Abram has a promise. He's very clear on it, it seems. He's moving in it. He's seeing God work. He's seeing God do other things. We don't know that Sarai is in on the voice of God part of it yet. She's hearing the promise following Abram, it seems. And so she hasn't really had her own experience with this yet,
that we're aware of.
And I think that's interesting. So it's a bit vicarious for her. She doesn't see it really working out. Maybe we understand that. Maybe we get, like you're saying, she's like in her culture, well, we know it's supposed to be C. There's a way we can get to that, make that equation work if I'm not involved. So I can indirectly be involved and we can do that. She thinks that. What I am thinking about as Abram, who's pretty solid on the promise, why does he start to weaken? Like, why doesn't he say, look, honey, this is, we hear this passage preached all the time, like he should have got his wife to submit, that's so like cavalier and come on. But how is the lie working on him, right? Not intentionally through Sarai. Sarai's doing what perhaps a good wife at that time would do. But how is the enemy taking advantage of Sarai's sort of thinking to herself, I'm barren, I'm failing, I'm
not enough.
I'm the part of this equation that's breaking down. That's a lie. And Abram, instead of like coming to her and saying, no, let's hold on, hang on, you're not barren, this kind of thing, the enemy's starting to talk to Abram and saying, yeah, maybe she's not enough. And so he has to join her in the scarcity separation.
Right. So even though he doesn't come up with the plan, he does submit to the plan.
Right. He has to come along and say, well, I guess that really does make sense. Yeah. I think about that so many times in life when people feel inspired by God to do something and they go to present the idea. I think it's the parable of the sower. The seed hits, the sower, this idea comes to me. God inspires something in me and I start to dream about it and think about it and it takes root. And then we go out to present the plan and maybe whoever's involved in it at first is like, that's a good plan. But after a year, 2 years, and it's not really starting to happen,
then that doubt creeps in.
Right.
It's like, did God really say?
Right. And so it's not the person that chokes it out, it's the surrounding circumstances that choke out the idea and kill it. And because we can't move in the mystery of how this is going to go, we have to move to certainty, like we can make this work. Typically the way like, I don't like this, is that negative emotion would start to come in like, wow, I was excited about this a while ago. Now this is starting to be kind of laborious. And I don't really like who's involved. And I've lost my joy in this whole thing. And it seems like it's getting kind of manipulative. Right there is our invitation to like, back up, hold on, back up. Where's the joy? Like, where is it? What happened? Let's back up. Joyful relationship, connection. I wonder if there's this separation happening between Sarai and Abram. And we're going to see it get wider. but there's that crack between them that's occurring. And all of this working together is that separation worldview coming back in. And it's so powerful because it just, but wasn't God with you with Pharaoh? Like, hasn't he been leading all along? And you're like, but this is different. This is like harder because now it's my wife and her body's not functioning the way it's supposed to, or it is, or whatever. And now I just don't see that God can really do this.
And as the plummet into separation happens, we see even Sarai blames God. God prevented me.
Right. What a statement.
Yeah.
Yeah, not the connecting, reconciling.
I mean, that's her coping mechanism for feeling the negative emotion that she's feeling. Okay, let me blame somebody.
Right.
And I think we've seen that before.
Oh, yeah, all along. Cain, Adam, the woman you gave me.
Yeah.
It's not that I can't have a child yet. It's God has his hand against me.
Yeah.
And that is, boy, the worst separation worldview you can get into.
Yeah.
So we all find ourselves in these kinds of scenarios. And so let's follow as Sarai and Abram agree to move into separation and certainty and try to work this thing out without any failure involved. Let's see what happens when we pursue that separation worldview. What's the right thing? What's the thing to do here to get this God idea to actually work? Because it's not going to work.
Get this thing going.
Let's get it going. God had a good idea. Apparently, he doesn't know how to get it going forward, so we'll do it. I'll do it. We'll put this thing into gear. And so just that idea separates her from Abram, from herself, really who she is, and from others. I mean, she really gets kind of isolated on this as we're going to, and more so as it goes along. But she starts to move in that, and she thinks to herself. And so she comes up with a plan. And talk about her plan.
Yeah. So I'm thinking back to Eve, actually, because Eve had wrong thinking about God that led to wrong thinking about herself, that led to wrong action. So
Right.
she didn't believe God was going to give her what she needed. So the way she thought about herself was, I better do this. I better go out on my own and do it. And then the wrong action was she ate the fruit. So I see the same pattern in this situation where Sarai has wrong thinking about God. Abram's told her that, whether she heard it or not, experientially from God, she knows through Abram this plan that they're going to be the parents of this huge nation where the children are going to be more than the stars in the sky. I mean, it's unbelievable. And here she is, barren, postmenopausal, and no babies yet. So I'm going to take things into my own hand.
Yeah. Do you think she was like talking with her friends and saying, my husband, he is such a dreamer.
Yes, I do.
He's got 100 projects going, hasn't finished any of them. Now he's got this thing, we're going to be a blessing to the whole world.
She didn't have an iPhone where in her free time she could scroll through social media. So her social media were the other women in the camp. And I guarantee it.
Honey, we're going to be a blessing to all nations through you. Get it going. Yeah.
So she has this wrong thinking about herself. I'm going to take control here. That's the certainty mindset. And then we could say the wrong action. I mean, God can redeem everything, but we could say then the wrong action is she comes up with this plan. And the plan is to have her maidservant sleep with her husband and conceive the child and get this thing going, right? So it's interesting. She tells the plan to Abram, and he agrees with it. That's what's kind of stunning. But then at the same time, in the culture of the day, I think it was normal to have these type of relationships within the camp. It was kind of different morals and values than we have today. So Sarah enacts the plan, and then suddenly when she finds out Hagar has conceived, is she so happy? It worked. My plan worked. We're going to have the baby.
Right. And I think...
Is that her response?
Oh, no. Well, no. That's not her response, for sure.
She suddenly has contempt for Hagar, and she hates her.
Real passive-aggressive type of
Oh, my goodness.
person. So she comes to Abram and says, here's the plan. He's like, okay, that makes sense, right? It's not insane. It makes sense. That seems like a good thing to do. So they enact it. Pregnancy happens. And then, she is like, it's like when we say, I don't really like this person, but I'm going to do the Christian thing and I'm going to let them, do this, and I'm going to let them have the glory for a little while. But deep in our heart, we're not doing it with any kind of joy. We're bitter. We're jealous. And this is what's happening with her. Why is she feeling filled with contempt when she looks at
Well, you
Hagar?
just said it. She's jealous.
Yeah.
So now she's jealous. So she hates her. Hagar, who is this woman from Egypt, and now why should she's just a slave. She's just a servant. And why should she be able to get pregnant with the child that should be mine?
That's going to be the blessing to all nations.
Yeah.
Our own plans, our own attempts to make God's will happen create separation.
Yeah.
That's a pretty strong warning on how and why we make the plans and do the things we do. Who, in her heart, who do you think Sarai is doing the plan for? What do you think? Is she doing it? I mean, do you think she's like, this is what God wants. I'm doing this for God. Do you think she has
I would hope so,
Yeah.
but as a woman, especially in that time period, I would think that, I wonder if she ever came to terms with her barrenness. I wonder if the longing for a child and to be a mother ever left her. And so I think initially, instigating the plan, her desire for a child.
But it can't be met in her own manipulation.
Right.
So we have a warning process here that we can look at, and we can examine our own lives and ask God to search us and know us. One of the questions that we like to ask people is, and this would have been a good challenge for Sarai if we were there with her, is to ask God, what are things I'm doing in my life for you that you never asked me to do?
So good.
Let me say that again. God, what are things that I'm doing in my life for you that you never invited me into? You know how we as believers, we get to think, well, God must want me to do this, and he must want me to do this, and he needs me to do this. And we go to do those things. Even, we've seen people way out in the world in these situations, and we get with them, and the way that we know to ask them, did God invite you into this, is the absence of joy in what they're doing. Like they hate it. And it's like, if God invited you into this, why is it's not that it's hard. People struggle and suffer with great joy. Mother Teresa with great joy. But when they're in it and it's absolute drudgery and you're embittered towards the people that you came to serve, then we have to ask the question, did God in fact invite you here? Right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting how God says, I'm not the one that invited you here. You invited yourself here in order to make something happen in your life or to give value to yourself like this, right? So I think that's what's happening with Sarai. And so as soon as we've lost our joy in what's going on, and another question that we like to ask people, sort of parameters on their life, is there anywhere in your life where you feel fear right now? Mm-hmm. So if we sat with Sarai and said, are you dealing with any fear and anxiety in your life right now? If so, where is it? Mm-hmm. And as you've said, it's the warning light pointing to an area of our life where the lie is starting to invade. Mm-hmm. The lie is creeping in, and the fear is the signal, like, pay attention right here, pay attention right here. and go to respond to God instead of reacting to the situation.
So with every thought, we have a choice,
Right.
or we have a feeling, and then with every feeling, we have a choice. Thought, feeling, choice. And so we can see in this situation with Hagar and Sarai that once the plan came to be and was successful in terms of a child being conceived,
Yeah, the human success, it worked.
Sarah's thought was this contemptuous feeling, this jealous feeling. And so she's totally reacting where she has the ability to hear and respond. We know that. But she's just reacting back to the situation.
Right.
And it's this downward spiral it's just causing separation all around. She complains to Abram, and Abram, she's your maidservant. Do whatever you want
Right.
with her, even though she's pregnant.
Right.
And I mean, the epitome of the separation worldview, she sends her out into the wilderness. She kicks her out of the house.
Separation's the answer.
Right.
Separation's the answer. So she has the opportunity to obey God, which is to hear and respond. That's the definition we've said of obey, to hear and respond appropriately from God. So what does it mean to disobey? Means to not hear. To not hear and react instead. That is to disobey.
Right. We're just reacting. Someone does something to us, we hate it, and we just react in kind.
So if we ask a person, are you obeying God? What we're really asking them is, are you listening and responding to God? If we say, we're not asking him, did you do something? Like this action. We're asking him, are you hearing and responding to God? Obey. If we say, did you disobey? We're saying, did you not listen to God and you're just doing whatever you want? See, it's more focused on the hearing and responding part than what you did.
Yeah.
But we're way down here on what you did. Oh, that's disobedience.
Yeah.
No, disobey started right here where you didn't ask.
Wrong belief.
Wrong belief, and it came down to this. So now we're down here, and so we can ask a person what you're afraid of as one way, where's the lie? And then we can ask them, do you have joy? That's a great question. Do you have joy? Because joy is where the Spirit is. We can't manufacture joy. She has no joy. She has fear. She's moving in this. And what happens is racism.
Ooh.
Right? What happens is subjugation of an inferior people group all of a sudden. And a kind of foreign policy strategy. What do we do with people we don't like anymore or who are competitive with us for position in our culture? Kick them out.
Wow.
Kick them out.
It's a microcosm.
It's the beginning
of just a huge conflict.
Right. So if we looked at the Middle East today, or really anywhere, and like what's going on here, there's a person who has contempt for another person and has the authority to kick them out. They do. And so that becomes a strategy. And when you kick them out, you build a wall so they can't come back. Any kind of emotional wall, a financial wall, an actual wall, so that those people cannot come back and remind me of my contempt again. It's a horrible plan. It's a horrible strategy. And we have to keep asking ourselves, in what way are we involved in this kind of thinking, whether I'm doing it or I'm just supporting a government that does it every day? We have to ask these sorts of questions.
Yeah, we do.
So Abram acquiesces to the policy. He's like, well, I'm not really for it, but that's maybe the passive person in the process. We're going to kick all these people out.
He just says, do what you want. I mean, he just says, she's your property.
Yeah.
Do what you want with her.
You're in charge of immigration. You do it. You take care of it. I don't know. I'm just going to watch a football game. And so you let me know how it goes. And so she's out. And so then now we have the big question of, what about Hagar? In a world that's still connected with a God who stays connected, whether we stay connected or not, in a God who's mysterious and has enough for everyone and is interested in the other and the outcast. What happens when one population or one person who has authority kicks out another person into a future of financial destitution and death? What does God do with that kind of person? And that's where we're going to go next.
Abram, he's known as the first to believe in God, the father of the great Abrahamic faiths. He's not that yet, but he's on the journey to become that. And his wife manipulates the situation, and he submits to it. The servant becomes pregnant, and Sarai has contempt and kicks her out. And so as we move along Genesis 16, here's Hagar, and she's sitting by a spring, alone, afraid, abandoned, and with child. And the angel of the Lord comes to her. So here's this voice of God. And it's so beautiful because this is actually the first time that we're aware of in the scripture that God actually speaks to a woman by name since his encounter with Eve.
Well, so that says something about how God values Hagar.
Yeah, the outcast. She's the outcast.
Right.
But she's the pregnant outcast.
The one we would say, well, who's the important person in this story? Or in our society, who's the one if we were going to do something in our culture, who's the one we would go to get it to happen? Where God's really active. We would go to Abraham and Sarai. And yet here's this unimportant person, this person that's actually been trafficked in a sense. You know, she's just moved from servanthood, indentured servitude from one place to another. Now she doesn't even have that. She's out there. And God could go, the angel of the Lord could go anywhere. Abram, Sarai, where does he go? To Hagar.
He goes to Hagar. And the angel of the Lord asks Hagar such an important question. And it's a question that I think we need to reflect on every single day. And he says to Hagar, Hagar, where have you come from and where are you going? Where have you come from and where are you going?
Which is a funny question. It sounds rhetorical because, of course, the angel of the Lord knows that. But why that question? Why those two questions?
He knows where she's come from.
Right.
And he knows where she's going more than she knows where she's going. But then she is given an opportunity to truth tell, to confess, and she answers truthfully about her situation. And so when we're thinking of that question, don't think of it literally, where have you come from and where are you going? What is your experience of the past that got you into a frame of mind, a mode of thinking to where you are right now? And is that the healthiest place you can be? And where is that going to lead you to? Mm-hmm. So if I'm terrified from things that have happened in my past, and I'm in an unhealthy place in my spirit, I'm going to start threat forecasting about the future and coming up with what-if scenarios. So where have you come from and where are you going? As we think about that, I think the next most important question is, God, what do you want me to know about that? So she confesses where she is coming from and truth-telling. And we know that truth sets free.
Right. So she says, her response is, I'm running away. What is she saying about who she is, what she's experienced, and what's her coping mechanism for difficult scenarios? How do you interpret, if we could get inside of her mind?
Well, every I am statement is an identity statement, right? So if I'm running away, she might as well be saying, I'm an exile, I'm an outcast, I'm unworthy to live in the camp.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think maybe she's realized the only way I'm ever going to be able to exist in this world is to figure out ways to run away. How do I escape? She didn't choose to be an Egyptian maidservant. And she didn't choose to be like the one that's sent into Abram. She's doing what has been given to her in life to do. And it's been hard on her. She's just kind of bouncing
I mean,
along.
she's a servant.
Right. And so she's powerless. She doesn't have any say. It's not her fault that she got pregnant in that sense. And now she's being punished for it. And so I'm just always going to be trying to run away and get out of these terrible situations I end up in, not because I chose them, because I keep getting put in these situations. I'm fleeing the one that's over me.
So she gets her truth out and her perception of what's true. It feels really true, her reality. She gets her truth out, and then God replaces it with his truth. And the truth is, he tells her, you are with child, and your child shall be called Ishmael.
Wow.
He's actually giving her a birth announcement and naming the child. That only happens a handful of times in Scripture. And again, we see the lowliest of the low receiving the birth announcement. And not only is he telling her the name of the child Ishmael, that means, in the original language, the beginning of the word means to listen or to hear, and the end of the word El means God. So he's in essence telling her, God hears you. And I want you to name your child that as a marker, as a remembrance. And then tell me if this doesn't sound familiar. You are with child, and you shall name him Ishmael. You are bearing a son, and he will be the first in a multitude of people. He will be the first in a nation. This child will become a nation of people. Actually, the word is more than can be counted.
Yeah.
I mean, this is stunning truth.
Yeah.
Again, and it's experiential. She's not reading it in a book. She's saying her truth. I'm alone, I'm helpless, I'm hopeless, I'm powerless, I'm afraid, I'm nobody, I'm nothing, I'm kicked out. And God says, wait a minute, no, you are with child. You're going to be ranked in history as one of the few women who received a birth announcement and a name for your child, who is going to be the father of a nation.
And she's talking to the angel of the Lord. She's not a God follower. She's an Egyptian.
Oh yeah, she's a Gentile.
So she's not like out there having a quiet time saying, dear Lord, help me to know what to do. She is, as far as she knows, her truth is, I am all alone. I am as disconnected as you'll ever be. I've even lost the connection of just being an indentured servant. And yet it's not true.
The whole thing is a lie.
And right in that passage, it says, and the angel found her, which is how David describes God as a shepherd going out and searching for lost sheep. It's that same, it's like God's looking for and finding the lost one. And so she's experientially discovering the same God that Abram has discovered, but somehow forgotten here. And again, it's not because she can make it happen. She's receiving the blessing of God. And so here again, how does she know who it is? Because of he initiates, he blesses, he's honoring her. Where have you come from? You have come from me. Where are you going? You are going in to be the mother of nations. Things that she would have, how would she ever think that or know that apart from an experiential encounter with this living God?
And as God is describing her child to her, he also says he will be a wild donkey of a man. Unpack that for me.
Well, that sounds kind of crazy for us.
Unpack that for us.
So if I'm a person from North America and say you're pregnant with our first son, and the angel of the Lord comes to me and says, well, he's going to be a wild donkey of a man. That would bother me. That was like
scary.
Yeah. Could we?
Out of control.
Yeah, stubborn.
Untamable.
Stubborn. But for Hagar, in her culture and in her day, the donkey was a sign, the wild donkey was a sign of a free person that could never be domesticated or controlled by a human. And if she could have known God beforehand and prayed and dedicated this child to God, she would have prayed that he would be a wild donkey of a man. And so the angel of the Lord is promising her, I'm telling you, as a slave yourself, as a woman whose child will never be free in this culture, I'm telling you, this child will be born and live free forever. It would have been the most astounding, beautiful thing she could have ever heard. You can actually see in the book of Job where it describes the donkey as the wild and free animal, like an eagle for us.
Right. I was getting ready to say it's like in today's culture, if someone prophesied over your child and said your child will be a soaring eagle, how meaningful as an American that would be to us.
And the angel of the Lord is going to go on to describe what the life of Ishmael is going to be like. And so when the angel of the Lord says to her, "Go, you need to go back and submit to the mistress," God's reconnecting her back into a place where there's been separation. It's the idea that unless you go back there and stay connected, this needs to happen there. So he's like connecting all these things. And although it looks like a horrible situation out of control, it's actually, then you see God start to weave it all back together.
Yes.
So even though bad idea, bad plan, victimized by the plan, wow, what comes out of it? A leader of nations. You're the mother of nations because of this injustice that was enacted upon you. Astounding, as we read this, for us to say, God, I've suffered an injustice. And God's like, okay, great. Like, have you not read the story?
The worse the injustice, the greater things I can do with it.
How bad do you want it to be? Do you want to be a leader of nations? Like, let's start in slavery.
Yeah.
Like and this is what the Israelites are hearing. Wait a second. A child conceived in a position of slavery and bondage ends up leader of a nation. What happens to a nation that's been in bondage when they're released into the desert free? Can they become an influencer of the whole world?
Right.
I think that's the idea that Moses wants Israel to start to think about. You are the wild donkey of the man. God has named you. He's giving birth to you out of bondage into, and crazy Ishmael is one of the examples.
Yeah.
This mistake kid, right? And so in that description of what this child is going to be like, number one, free. Number two, connected. His hand, the angel says, his hand will be against his neighbor, and his neighbor's hand will be against his.
Somehow we think that means they're going to be fighting.
Right.
But what does it really mean?
Yeah, this. Right.
Right.
They're traders.
Their hands were against each other.
And they're going to be exchanging as merchants. And so this is the sign of the trade of the exchange. And so he's a free man who lives in connection to others. What a blessing. What a blessing. And finally, where he's going to live in relation to later Isaac. Where is he going to live? And the angel of the Lord says he's going to live to the east of his relatives. Sometimes that's mistranslated as in hostility to, but we know from the context and from the ancient Hebrew that the idea is he's going to live to the east of, because he will settle in Paran, east of the descendants of Isaac.
East of his kinsmen.
East of his kinsmen. So in this little lonely, like Bethlehem, story.
It's almost a foreshadowing.
It is. It's so much that. It's this, in the middle of, out of the desert is going to come this nation leader of many nations, just like Israel is going to become that, and Jesus and John the Baptist and all these ones that are going to come like this. Hagar is being honored and called into the truth of who she's in fact always been. The connection's always been present. The mystery is always there and working. And there's enough for her and her child. She's going to experience this again. There's enough for you. There's actually more than enough for you. Stay connected. Don't run away. Go back and submit. And just kind of another just side thought on that. because Ishmael becomes what's considered the spiritual father of the Muslim world,
The Arab nation.
the Arab nations, their most important word is submit
Yeah.
to God. And so Hagar, as the mother of Ishmael, the command in the Old Testament is for her to go back and submit to her master, to them. And so this word submission is a very deep and powerful word to all the descendants of Ishmael up until this day. Go back and submit. That's what the Muslim does and believes.
And so it's so important at that time. They had these spiritual markers of places, and we see it more and more as the story continues. But there's so much to do with naming here. She kind of comes to grips with her false name, her false identity, and God names her child. And then in turn, she comes into her true identity, mother of a nation. She's going to be the mother of a nation. And then she names the place. And she names the well that she was sitting by, the well of the God who sees. And isn't that the longing of all of our hearts, to be seen and known by God?
Yeah.